conducting employee surveys and providing organization development consulting. And over the past 3 years, we've experienced tremendous growth, and we were named recently to the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing private companies in America. As you can see, we work around the world. We do a variety of things as well as 360-degree feedback and coaching. But our topic today, what we'll address really is about creating a great culture in your organization and how to leverage that. George, let me turn some time over to you. I'll introduce you a little bit here. George Blomgren is the Director of Culture Strategy at The Good Jobs. In his role there, he draws on years of HR marketing and recruiting experience to help companies leverage their culture to attract top-notch talent. And I'll let you talk more about The Good Jobs and the services that you provide as well.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I appreciate the introduction. So obviously, The Good Jobs are a lot newer than DecisionWise, but launched in 2013. You can see that we've already got some pretty good companies working with us to kind of help them attract talent. And basically, The Good Jobs, we've got a turnkey employment branding solution that helps companies leverage their culture, not just to attract top talent, but talent that aligns well with their culture. The sort of people that are likely to remain engaged and stick around, and that's certainly what employers are looking for these days. So let's go ahead, Charles.
I was going to say, housekeeping items, this webinar is scheduled for an hour. Everyone's going to be on mute, so if you have questions, please submit them using the question toolbar, and we'll try to address those at the end of the session. This session's also been approved for 1 hour of both HRCI and SHRM recertification. And then after this webinar, I'll be sending an email out to everyone with a link to the slides as well as the activity codes for HRCI and SHRM credit. The webinar is going to be split up kind of in two. George is going to take the first half to talk about ways to increase or to improve the company culture and to leverage it. And then I'll be talking more about employee value proposition during the second part of the webinar. So George, go ahead and take it away.
Excellent. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So the chart that you should be seeing here right about now is basically, this is kind of a depiction of exactly what the war for talent looks like. And basically, there we go. The vertical bars that you can see here are the available talent pool. That solid gray horizontal bar is the average job creation rate. So the war for talent, as you're probably all aware, is literally the direct result of World War II. People came back from the war. They started families. 18 years later, the children, the baby boomers, went to work. And at that point in time, for every 2 of them entering the workforce, approximately, there was 1 person leaving the workforce. So fast forward to 2012, and exactly the opposite was projected to be true, that for every 2 of the baby boomers who were at least eligible effectively immediately to leave the workforce, there would only be 1 worker replacing them, in other words, entering the workforce. So, you know, some of the things that you can see from this slide here, first of all, that first vertical bar that looks like that's where the bottom fell out, that's pretty much 2012. And you can see that the situation is going to get considerably worse between now and 2025. Only then is it going to start getting better gradually, and it's really not going to return to where it was just a few years ago for quite a while. So this is the war for talent. Interestingly enough, this is kind of the classic theory that was first developed by McKinsey researchers in the 1990s. They were only focusing actually on the talent supply side of the equation. Unfortunately, we've got kind of a perfect storm going here. In spite of the fact that economic recovery is not complete, we actually have more open positions posted right now than there have been in approximately 15 to 20 years. So basically, bottom line, we've got a lot more competition for a lot less talent. This next slide actually kind of breaks it down on a generational basis. It doesn't tell us anything that's terribly surprising. Silence or the greatest generation, obviously not comprising a huge portion of the workforce anymore. Gen Xers, kind of a constant. Boomers, obviously in a state of decline. Because this chart shows such an extended period of time, starting in 1995, it doesn't really show the precipitous exodus of boomers from the workforce that's happening right now. I actually read an article the other day, a validated statistic that over 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. And obviously, in many cases, taking very important tribal knowledge with them. But perhaps more to the point, just kind of creating an overall talent deficit. So I'm actually going to refer back to a couple of the generational implications of this here in the next slide. So what this slide really illustrates is the hidden cost of bad employer branding, or I should maybe say in many cases, insufficient employer branding. or a complete lack of employer branding, specifically online. And before I kind of dive in here, I want to share 3 statistics that we have here at the Good Jobs from an ongoing survey that we do of job seekers. And those 3 statistics, 99% of them say that if they find out about a job opportunity, for example, they do research that employer online before they decide how they're going to proceed. 99%. Of them, 84% say that they specifically research that employer on that employer's website, which is not great news for the likes of Glassdoor and other sort of review sites. And in terms of what they're looking for, 97% say that culture is as important or more important than compensation. So back to the slide that you're looking at here, and this, again, the hidden kind of cost. What you see here is sort of a talent pipeline. This is the way that a lot of employers view their talent pipeline. In many cases, they also kind of view a sales pipeline the same way. But you've got that top row of people who are applying for your positions, for example, and you're winnowing them through your process. Your process consisting of phone screens, assessments, interviews, leading up to a hire. The problem here is that one of the most important parts of this picture is actually invisible. And what I'm referring to is the people who are, again, seeing your job posting, for example, or perhaps you're reaching out to them, and they're doing that research. That 99% are doing that research, and if they're not finding a compelling reason, they are not applying for the position, they're not responding to you. So think back to the data that we saw from the War for Talent. This is not only an inefficiency, in other words, kind of a numbers game. This is not only an inefficiency we really can't afford right now. Perhaps more to the point is the types of talent that we're talking about. One, this is the discerning job seekers who take employment decisions very seriously. So they're doing their homework. And think about what they're really looking for. They're looking to find a long-term home where they're going to be engaged and want to stick around. And that, of course, is the type of talent we want to hire. Secondly, it's the exceptional job seekers who have alternatives, and they know it. Perhaps they have other offers in pocket. Third, it is the passive talent. Those who, by definition, have a job, have benefits that they're relatively satisfied with. And 2 comments about passive talent as a former working recruiter. One, that's like 80% plus of the talent pool right now. 2, in all my years of recruiting, I never had anybody say to me, an employer say to me, go find us people who are out of work. They typically want to hire the passive talent. Finally, though, it's the millennials. One of the things we hear about millennials is they are born researchers with access to Google everywhere they go, right at their fingertips. And they really are looking for the what's in it for me. And I don't mean that in a pejorative or superficial sense. They really want to work for an employer that values the things that they do. So, and by the way, I think they've actually influenced the rest of us, because even the Gen Xers and the baby boomers I talk to these days have very specific ideas in mind about what they're looking for in their next employer, for example. So the real problem here is not the inefficiency. The real problem is that in many cases, the person that we're losing would have been our best hire. And we've got a polling question for you now before we kind of proceed and talk a little about what constitutes good online employer branding. We're going to ask you to kind of rate yourself. How well are you doing this right now?
So I've gone and launched the poll there, George. Everyone should be seeing this on their screen. Please take a moment to reply. We'll leave this open for a few more seconds and then close the poll and show you the results. Okay, it looks like most people have voted right now. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then share the results with the audience. Okay, so George, I'm not sure if you can see this on your end as well. 51%. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I just roll? Sorry, I think I asked the wrong poll question here. Sorry about that. Let me do this one more time. Okay, so I've got the right poll rolling. Sorry about that, George. So how well would you rate your website and other web and social media channels in terms of communicating your culture? I'll save the responses to the previous poll for the next segment, our presentation. So the poll's open. People are responding. Looks like most have responded. They had good practice the first time. I'm going to close the poll here and share the results. So George, let's see, 29% poor, 39% okay, 26% good, and 6% fantastic.
Okay, well that provides a real good kind of benchmark before we actually talk about, so what are all the ways to actually do this?
I'll go ahead and hide the poll then now, George, and go back to the slides.
Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share kind of a case study of one approach. I'm actually going to show you what the Good Jobs culture badges look like in action as kind of a case study, just to demonstrate kind of one way of doing this with a company that probably a lot of you are familiar with. First, so here's what the badges look like, and we'll kind of come back to this list. They basically correspond to, you know, the why would somebody want to work for you, the things that today's job seekers are looking for in an employer. We really help employers kind of create transparency so that people can see very specific examples of what does that look like. Fun, for example. So I'm actually going to use, as an example, again, a company you're all very familiar with, I'm sure, which is Zappos. A company that, you know, very famous for having a very, very positive and very intentional culture, one that they're very self-aware of, one that they leverage very effectively to attract good talent. So I think it's very interesting. I mean, ironically, this is probably the sort of company that almost doesn't need to have a career section. But again, ironically, what we tend to find here at the Good Jobs is the companies that are kind of like that and probably don't need it, in many cases have the very best career sections. So you'll notice on the slide here, and I'm actually using screen captures. I've learned the hard way what happens if you try to do a live demo during the middle of a webinar. Something always goes wrong. So why Zappos? You know, people are actually asking the question, why would I want to come work for Zappos? So that takes them to a page. And I want to comment on this. I see similar versions of this page on a lot of employers' websites. Typically, it's maybe the culture page, kind of defining the culture. Inevitably, though, or in most cases, it's really defined in kind of a what this looks like from our side of the desk. In other words, some variation on what I like to call the here at Acme Dynamite, we make the finest explosive on the planet. Therefore, we are always looking for chemical engineers with 10+ years of experience, which is good information, but there's no what's in it for me. So Zappos gets it, obviously, because this page is just dripping with what's in it for me. And if we were to scroll down here, what we would see is the culture badges. And 3 thoughts, well, let's make it 2 thoughts on badges. One of the things we hear about people on websites these days is they really don't read. They scan, their eyes dart around. Only if something, like a colorful icon, catches their attention, do they take the time to drill down. The second thing I want to share is, and I'm going to use an example. If you're familiar with that top workplaces badge that you often see on employers' websites, maybe some of you have that, 9 times out of 10, if you click on that, nothing happens. It's not a hyperlink. So it completely begs the question, why? What specifically makes you such a good place to work? It also seems to imply that it's a one-size-fits-all proposition. Fun is another example. Not everybody has the same idea of fun, so don't tell me you're fun. Show me exactly what that looks like. And that's really where our badges shine. So if somebody were to click the fun badge here, it pops open this window that shows a list of literally, you know, everything that Zappos does to be fun, everything they do to create a positive work environment for their employees. And as you can see here, that actually would scroll down quite a ways. Zappos has a pretty impressive list. So that's what, you know, one way of kind of creating transparency. And, you know, one of the best practices here that I would definitely highlight is really getting down to the tangible nitty-gritty. You know, don't just tell people that you're fun. Provide all the specific things so that they can decide for themselves if that is their idea of fun. So that's, again, one kind of case study of what creating that sort of transparency on your career section could look like. Now, so I showed the fun badge, a few other examples back to this list here. Fun, extreme perks, that's things that kind of go above and beyond your you know, kind of traditional health and welfare benefits. Corporate responsibility, very important to today's job seekers, and they really want to know the specifics, you know, what exactly are you doing to give back to the community, for example. Flex time, flexibility, again, that's another thing that's very important to today's job seekers. Green, inclusion, which is really diversity in an applied sense. And finally, career development. That also is one that's extremely important to millennials and today's other job seekers. And they don't just want vague statements like there's lots of growth opportunities here. They really want to understand the specifics. What exactly does that look like? You know, do you have a kind of learning management system in place? You know, do you have career paths defined? Things like that. So, having shared all of that, I now want to talk a little bit about other ways, because we do not claim for 1 second. You know, Zappos has lots of other things in their careers section. For example, our badges are not the be-all, end-all of ways to sort of explain and define your culture for visitors to your website. So here are some other ideas that I want to share. First, photos and videos. You know, if a picture is worth 1,000 words in this YouTube world, what is a video worth? So first idea there is, in fact, to use YouTube. It's not only a free way of hosting your videos, it's also a way of making them searchable to the people who are visiting YouTube. Couple of pieces of advice about employment branding videos. The first of which is there's nothing wrong with spending tens of thousands of dollars to have a professionally produced video. But if that doesn't really speak to your sort of culture, if you really have more of an informal culture, that's not necessarily the way to go. You know, YouTube really has changed our expectations and preferences in terms of what we look for in a video. I think it's not so much production value anymore. It's really about authenticity, creativity, and just entertainment value. Which leads to a second point, which is you can get very nuanced with your videos. And I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I saw an employment branding video for a security company where one of the employees who was featured throughout the video had the noticeable remains of a black eye. And I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that the message was very clear. If you're not comfortable in the sort of position where there might be some physical altercation, this really is not the job for you. The final point that I really want to make is think big. Think beyond kind of a single employment branding video. Here's an example. For each job posting that you have, create a 30-second video of the hiring manager explaining, here's what the job is and here's what I'm looking for. I think that's really helpful because it gives people kind of an insight from the person who sort of defines the job, what it is. And secondly, it gives some insights into that hiring manager themselves. So that's photos and videos. The second one is really kind of a specific example of a type of photo that I think you want to include, and that's your workplace. You know, if you think about it, your workplace really is sort of the ultimate tangible physical face of your culture and your brand. And people really want to know what that looks like, and here's how not to do this. I actually had to laugh recently when I saw a manufacturer who talked about in their career section their new award-winning facility without showing any pictures of it. Third, employee testimonials can be very powerful. One caveat there, if all of your testimonials look like they were written by the marketing department and signed off on by the legal department, that too says something about your culture and maybe not a positive thing. So again, if that's really the sort of company that you are, authenticity trumps everything else. Final insight in terms of other things that people might want to know about is your hiring process and how to get hired. And I find it a little bit interesting that I talk to a lot of employers who are reluctant to put their cards on the table. I personally don't see any downside. In fact, if I put my cards on the table, the job seekers who show up with, you know, clearly they've, read that section, you know, those are the ones who have done their homework and have taken the time to prepare. I mean, those are the sorts of people that I want to hire. So I think this can be a really valuable idea too. So that is some additional ways to showcase your culture. Finally here, I want to talk about some places other than your own website that you want to be utilizing. You know, what are some of the other resources that today's job seekers are utilizing? So with the kind of the standing point here, that all roads lead to Rome. Again, it's at 84% of job seekers who pretty much say, however I find out about your positions, wherever else I might do some of my research, I'm going to circle back to your website. Again, 84%. So, and I'll share some insights about most of these in terms of how to use them well, too. So LinkedIn, for professional, technical, and executive talent, obviously this has become a very common place that people turn to look for opportunities. So they're on LinkedIn. Perhaps you've got your jobs posted on LinkedIn. They're researching you on LinkedIn. And I mean really two things by that. One, they're researching you. HR people, recruiters, hiring managers, leaders, they want to get some insights about the people that they're going to be working for and with. So if you have a pretty blank profile or you have one that doesn't necessarily convey here's why this person would be a good manager, you probably want to reconsider that. The second thing, they're researching your company. You've got that company profile on LinkedIn. Here's a very powerful insight that I'll share with you. I think it's very interesting that about 95% of the company profiles that I see on LinkedIn were clearly written to appeal to customers. Customers are not researching you on LinkedIn. Job seekers are, salespeople are, but not customers. So you probably want to rethink the copy that you have in your company profile. Pinterest, it's not necessarily that that's sort of a great place because a lot of people go there looking for jobs so much as it's just a very easy to work with kind of content management system, platform to assemble, boards that, for example, one might show pictures of events, another might kind of have infographics that sort of identify what your culture really is all about. The third, review sites, such as Glassdoor, and Indeed is actually a fairly popular site for reviewing employers as well. One kind of tip that I want to share about that, very common question that I get is, if there's negative feedback on Glassdoor, for example, do I have to respond to it on Glassdoor? Do I have to pay for kind of that upgrade to do so? And here's my thought on that, at least. I have never seen a response to a negative comment from an employer. I've never seen a response on a review site that didn't come across as looking either defensive or adversarial. So my suggestion is don't respond on the review sites themselves. Just understand and have confidence that reasonable job seekers will always circle back to your website hoping to learn the other side of the story. And that's really where you can kind of present your case and all of the reasons why you think that somebody should want to work for you, rather than responding directly on those review sites. Twitter, kind of the power tip there is I see a fair number of employers who all they do on Twitter is just post links to their job postings. Really, essentially what they're doing is misusing Twitter as a job board when that's not what it is. So you want to mix that content up. Have tweets that have the sort of content you saw under our culture badges, kind of the reasons why somebody would want to come work for you, as well as photographs. Show photos of events, show photos of your company engaging in corporate responsibility. Job boards, I talked to an increasing number of employers who say that they're not finding them particularly effective anymore, especially for millennials. But the one point that I want to share here is some boards, job boards, have a company profile. Typically what I see is one of two things. Either it's left blank, or again, it's that same language that was used on the LinkedIn profile that was clearly written to appeal to customers who, again, are not researching you on job boards. So this is a good place to really think more in terms of what sort of copy is going to be attractive to job seekers. Finally, Facebook, the one tip that I want to share there is it's probably not going to be a great resource for you from a branding or employment branding resource, unless the sorts of people that you are, typically if you're a business-to-consumer company and the sort of people who make your customers also might be the sort of people who want to work for you, then Facebook's probably a pretty good resource. Otherwise, I think that you might just be sort of spreading yourself too thin and should focus more on LinkedIn and Twitter, for example. So, Charles, I think that's my portion, but before I hand it over to you, I just want to ask people to revisit and kind of rethink the rating that you gave yourself a little while ago. Now that we've talked about all the different things that you can be doing and should be doing, would you still give yourself the same grade? And Charles, I know you've got some great, more in-depth information to share with us. Go ahead and take it away.
Great, thanks, George. Yeah, this has been really helpful, and I kind of want to build on what you've kind of laid out here in terms of that, the idea of attracting the best talent to your organization. My presentation is going to be more about the employee value proposition, which encompasses, of course, all those things that you've talked about, George, and understanding what benefits the employee receives from the organization in exchange for the employee's work. That's really the simple definition here. But it's a little bit broader as we get into what does that really mean. You want your employees to really understand what value they received from working at your organization besides just the paycheck. So let's talk about what this definition means a little bit more in depth. We look at it as your employee value proposition should answer these 4 different questions. So what does it take to attract the right people, to motivate them, to retain them? And then this last question is sometimes difficult for people to answer, and that is, what is your company's brand? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's really the essence of what this employee value proposition is. You want it to be something that encompasses all 4 of these different areas. So I'm going to pose, actually I'm going to show you the poll question that I ran before, and I'll share the results with you as well that we were talking about. This is where I would have done the poll. And many of you responded that no, you don't actually have an employee value proposition in place, 51%. 26% said yes, we do, but it's not formally rolled out. And then 23% said yes, we use it to leverage, attract, and retain and engage talent. And so congratulations to you all. You're doing a great job. What we find, though, as we really look at this question, I'll go back to the slides here, is, let's see, let me close this. Okay, great. Is that when you really look at it, everyone has an employee value proposition, whether you choose to call it that or not. In other words, your employees know exactly what that employee value proposition is for them, even if the organization hasn't, gone through and really done a rigorous study of what it means to each and all their employees. So you can bet if you went around and asked an employee, hey, what do you value about working here? They could give you a list pretty quickly of 4 or 5 things that attracted them to work there, that motivate them, and that keep them around as well. And we're going to talk about what some of those things are. So as we look at this list of benefits, these types of benefits we were talking about before, there's both these formal and informal benefits. Formal being those that are kind of expected as part of this job contract. informal being those that employees perceive as additional benefits that aren't necessarily written into their job description. Tangible are those that you can actually kind of touch and feel and maybe put down on a piece of paper. Intangible are those that are more, well, like the word says, you can't really describe them or write them down into a contract. And George, as you were talking about some of the culture badges, you know, we talked earlier about, you know, identifying where some of these culture badges would fit in terms of this scale from formal to informal, tangible to intangible. Do you want to describe some of those?
Yeah, you know, well, just kind of a comment. So I think our culture badges do a pretty good job of capturing elements of the formal tangible, the formal intangible, the informal tangible. But culture is a big word. It's a big concept that kind of covers an awful lot of ground. I think the best way of understanding what we really capture with our badges is it really reflects how you invest in your employees and the things that matter to them. It's not so much about the real intangible things that, you know, sometimes when companies talk about their culture, and then sometimes they're not only kind of abstract, but even a little bit kind of like, what exactly does that mean? Like, we work hard and we play hard. But again, our badges tend to focus more on the specific, tangible, what's in it for me type aspects of your culture.
Excellent. So, and we'll get some examples here. So as we look at formal, tangible benefits, these are the things obviously in the contract. So your pay, health care, 401k, sometimes even a company car might be included in some of those tangible benefits. When we look at formal, intangible, these are a little bit more nebulous. So here we're talking about safety. In other words, when I go to work, do I feel safe and protected, you know, both physically and mentally? Am I respected? Do I feel included? And this, you know, this usually deals with maybe diversity, but also in terms of discrimination, whether that be racial or sexual discrimination. And am I protected? So in other words, if I screw up, will the company defend me, maybe from litigation or something like that? You know, is there a relative safety net there that I can rely on at this organization? When we look at informal tangible, some of these include the commute, the environment of the office, and people, these last two people really expect. So they expect some advancement opportunities and then some things that they can put on their resume. And so sometimes we don't think about that necessarily with employees directly, but this is what's in the back of most people's minds when they're looking at their particular job they're working for and what it's doing to help build their career. Informal tangible can be a lot of different things, and you know, this we'll talk more about the brand and identifying with the brand of the organization. We've talked a lot about on different webinars the keys to engagement, meaning autonomy, growth, impact, and connection. Leadership style could be another tangible or intangible benefit for an individual. The culture, which we've talked about a lot already, different relationships, you know, having a good friend at work, whether their values aligned with the organization. So these are all very important as well. However, they're somewhat, like I said, nebulous and sometimes difficult to define for an individual. But they're just as important. So how do you go about really understanding what your employee value proposition is? You know, we understand that, okay, this proposition or these collection of benefits, and there could be a list of maybe 10 or 20 or 50 different things that you could probably come up with in a brainstorming session. You know, how do you really quantify that into a decent or a focused employee value proposition? Well, what you want to do is really understand what your employees feel about working at the organization. And again, it'll be different for a lot of employees. They're not all going to have the same opinions, but we encourage you to conduct a survey with them. But before you do the survey, you can do a little bit of background homework by conducting focus groups with different groups within the organization. And the focus groups usually center, the questions in those focus groups center around those first four that we posed before. In other words, what attracted you to work here? What motivates you to work here? And why are you staying here? And then what is the company brand to you? From that information, you can get your long list of all these different items that you want to ask on a survey to get more quantifiable information. So let me show you a sample survey really quickly that will show you an example of what I'm talking about here. So here we built a survey that has a variety of different questions here. We use a method to kind of rank order these different attributes. So from the focus groups, for example, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. You can see that we've come up with a list of different attributes that initially attracted individuals to the company. And so then you ask individuals, okay, well, which ones are most important to you? Well, the work aligned with my interests. There were some good work-life balance opportunities here. I was really attracted to the organization for the career opportunities I would have, and then the potential for recognition. And so they just go down and include these and can kind of sort them back and forth. And then, you know, we like to ask another question that says, okay, what keeps you here? What, you know, if you look at your job today, what are the top 5 attributes that you like most? And so, as opposed to understanding what it was previously, why they joined, now you can do an analysis to see what's keeping them here, what's changed. So maybe it's changed a little bit, where the talents or the job fitting their talents isn't so important, but working on challenging assignments is important. Learning and development opportunities are really important to me now. You know, my work schedule is still just as important as it used to be, and so be able to go through and do those things. And so you can be really creative with the survey, ask different questions. A lot of times there are a list of all of the different benefits that you offer, whether it's a 401k plan, paid time off for different reasons, you know, the lunch, free lunch, or other perks that you're offering in the organization. All of these can be quantified within the survey that you're asking people to really help define your employee value proposition. Once you have this information, you can do some really good analysis with the results. So let me switch back over to the presentation to talk a little bit more about that. What you can do is what's called a segmentation study, so segmenting the employee population. So what I mentioned before is not everyone is going to feel that all these benefits are equally important to them. They're not going to rank order all those items the same way. You're going to find that you probably have a pretty diverse crowd within your organization. But what you can do is start to find groupings and similarities between some of these individuals. And this will give you a better idea of how to really leverage and use your employee value proposition to attract those different types of people. So the way to really segment these groups are through demographics or job position, the levels, or the different benefits sought. Let me give you an example of what this looks like. I'll flip over to a sample report here. One second. Here we go. So what we like to show in this case is you know, different profiles. So from your survey results, you can then look at these different groupings. And so as we looked at, for example, we came up with 4 profiles in this one example. The first profile is the largest segment, attracted to the work that they'll be doing. They have more tenure than other segments in the company, and they stay because they love living in the area and have a passion for the industry. You can see some of the demographic breakouts. 56% have advanced degrees, 75% are female. The average tenure is 10 years or more. Profile 2 is a little bit different. They're attracted for the base pay and so on. So these are just general descriptions, but it really helps you to understand these different pockets of interest within your organization and the types of people that are attracted to your organization for those different reasons. So we look at this and say, okay, well, what attracts these different groups? So you get some good insight here, because then they rank ordered some of those attributes that we saw before in the survey at these different levels. Number 1, the work I would be doing is really important to all of these groups. Well, actually the first, all 4 of these groups, not so much to profile 3. Opportunities are important. Company brand was important to this first profile, but not as important to some of these others. You can also look at what commits them to stay, so what keeps you here. Recognition is important, the work I do, the rewards I receive. So again, you can start seeing the differences emerge as you look at some of these different groups. What we like to do is do an in-depth analysis on these different profiles. So as we look at profile 1, we look at those things that attract and commit them to stay, as we were looking at before. But we also can tell why they're working here. They have a passion for the industry, the location, the values or the work flexibility is important. They had some benefit requests that came out, so sabbatical leave, flexible work schedule, on-site fitness facility, so some additional insights here. And then what we like to do as well is look at this in terms of these dimensions. So understanding what attracted them, retains them, and motivates them to stay. There's some overlap you can see. So as you look at career growth and personal growth, those overlap all 3 of those different areas. Whereas flexibility and location are really important to attract and retain people. Recognition is more about motivating and retention as opposed to attracting people. And this aligns really well with our model of employee engagement, because as we look at what satisfaction, these satisfaction elements, things like paid benefits and so on, satisfaction really drives retention and attraction, but engagement elements like meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, connection, all those contribute to motivation and engagement. We have some additional description here in terms of what flexibility means for this group and career growth, location, those types of things. All this information can be gleaned from your survey results, and it's really helpful if you use open-ended questions because you can get some real good description here, descriptions of what's going on. The other thing here are job factors. So 91% of the employees in this segment believe that the work they did with the company makes good use of their talents and abilities. So they feel really utilized, they feel like they're contributing, that they're having an impact on the organization. And they were initially attracted by career opportunities, but only 66% believe that their opportunities at this company are aligned with their long-term career goals. So there's an opportunity or maybe an issue that you need to look at. In other words, to retain these people, you need to discover what their long-term career goals are and create some alignment opportunities for them to take advantage of. A few quotes here: understanding how my work and development can have an impact on the organization, my rewards is extremely motivating, as opposed to knowing the qualifications and position readiness form or job description. And there's some other opportunities to make an impact. Having an impact at work is a top factor for retaining members of this segment. And so on. One last thing, there's a few other breakouts that we did. We broke this out first by personal factors. Now we look at organizational factors. 84% of these believe that they belong at this company. This is that sense of community or connection that they have. Brand recognition. So they're originally attracted to the brand name associated with the company. That way they can, and this is where people are feeling like, okay, I can now brag to my friends that, hey, I work at this company, and it's kind of got some cachet when they're talking about their work. Some other interesting insights, I like living in the working area. Team members promoted based on their qualifications. These are all areas that they responded favorably to. When we look at rewards, that was one of the big drivers for this group. We can see the different factors that attract and commit them, and that's important as well, especially if you're trying to retain your best talent or attract the best talent in a competitive marketplace. So I'll send out this sample report. I'm not going to go through every single detail, but you can see by using your focus groups, you'll gain kind of a broad understanding of what's going on. And then by doing a survey or surveying your employees, you'll get some really in-depth information that helps you create a real accurate employee value proposition. You'll learn some things that you might have thought were not important to employees overall, but you find out are actually very important to one or multiple segments within the organization. And then you can use those things to attract and retain those people. I'm going to flip back over to our slides just to kind of tie this up a little bit better. Let's see here. So as we look at this then, so really how do you go about leveraging this information? Well, it's pretty simple. The first is, identify candidates that fit the organization employee value proposition based on those benefits that they're seeking through employment. So now you can better understand the types of people that you're trying to attract to your organization that are your best performers as well, and what really attracts them to the value that you're offering them. You also know how to retain individuals better, so you can really communicate better what values you're offering and how employees are benefiting from that. And then engagement is all about motivating people, going beyond those contractual elements. Again, we're not talking about those satisfaction, base pay or benefits or perks. We're talking about things that really drive engagement, such as meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection. And finally, we want to do an exercise here, and that is to help you understand a pretty bland benefit as health insurance. So everyone pretty much offers health insurance to most of their full-time employees. But why is health insurance important? You know, what is it? How does it resonate with employees at a deeper level than just providing, you know, coverage when you're sick or you know, have to go to the hospital? So, you know, the initial benefit, of course, is if you get sick, health insurance pays a portion of health care costs. But the real value is security for my family. Or it shows that my employer values me as a person and values my health, that they care about me, that they value helping people, and it views it as a fundamental service for their employees. So if you're able to communicate your health insurance benefits to your employees in this way, they better understand the true value that they're getting from health insurance, especially if your health insurance policies or benefits are better than others, than other organizations that you might be competing with or other organizations close by in your industry. People then value that benefit more and see it as one of those items that really helps to not only attract them but retain them in the organization. So that's just a brief example with health insurance. Now I'd like to conduct kind of a brief exercise here and look at a couple different corporate brands in terms of their employee value proposition. So the idea here is, as you look at some of these brand names, what is the employee value proposition that you see? So even if you don't work for this company, you might know enough about them that if you were to apply, you would recognize certain values or benefits that are important to you. And I'll go through a couple, and then George, I want you to chime in when we talk about Walmart and Zappos here. The first one is PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. We're pretty familiar with them. They're a large consulting firm. They do a lot of work around the world in terms of helping organizations on a variety of initiatives, either through HR or IT or accounting, different things like that. One of our consultants here at DecisionWise actually used to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the story that he tells is that the employee value proposition there is really quite simple. They do a lot of recruiting in our area, Brigham Young University being one of the largest universities here that they recruit from, and that's where he used to go to school. And he said the value proposition for a new graduate is to understand that first they're going to gain some great experience working with the company. They're going to travel probably around the country, maybe around the world, working with some large organizations on big projects, big consulting projects. They're going to get a lot of experience that they wouldn't get otherwise working maybe for a smaller company, and a lot of exposure to some really interesting projects and work that they'll be handling. So it's a great opportunity for them to pad their resume, to do some networking, to gain some contacts at different large companies around the country. They do understand the trade-off might be that they're going to be working 60 to 80 hours a week, that they'll be traveling maybe 4 days out of the week and be away from their families if they have one, and that they'll be putting in a lot of hard work before they really kind of see this payoff at the end. The benefit, though, they see is that, yeah, I'll pay my dues, I'll work there for 3 to 5 years, and the outcome is that I'm going to have a really great resume, and that I'll also be connected to some really big companies who might hire us on. And so the kind of the intangible benefit there is that, or the informal benefit is that PwC expects these recent graduates to usually go and work for the companies that they were providing services for. The benefit to PwC, obviously, is that they have now their own employees embedded with a lot of their clients, which increases their stickiness and ability to attract new business with those clients in the future. The benefit for that new employee that left the company is that they got great experience from PwC, they were paid well, and they were able to land a nice stable job, maybe with less working hours and in a more stable environment. So that's what we've seen with PwC as an example. Google is somewhat similar in that you know, a lot of people want to work for Google just because they can have that name on their resume. They get to work at an exciting environment. There's a lot of perks and opportunities there. I think we're all familiar with some of the nap pods that are offered, that Google offers, you know, free food through their cafeteria and various services like maybe dog walking or doing your laundry, things like that. The downside for employees, though, is that they have to work long hours. They might get burnt out. They'll be working, you know, a lot during these first years that they're at Google. And what we've heard is that the tenure rate at Google is only about 1.5 years. And so people recognize it maybe as a stepping stone onto greater things, but also as a unique and great organization to work with. So those are two brief examples of the employee value proposition. Now, as we get into look at Walmart and Zappos, and George, this is where I'd like you to chime in since you're really familiar with the Zappos company, you can see some of the interesting things that have been going on with Walmart recently in the news, and that pay has become an issue. There's been some people striking for better pay and benefits as well as hours, and also even the back during Christmas time when there was employees, or there was a donation drive being held by employees for employees for food because they couldn't feed their families. And so it was kind of a sad story that you could work at Walmart but you still couldn't put food on the table. And you look at that employee value proposition and think, okay, well, if you work at Walmart, you might get some experience. They'll kind of hire, they try to attract and hire as many people as they can, but they understand that they're not going to be paid a lot. They might not get the hours they want, but they most likely would be able to get a job. And then you can contrast that with Zappos and the culture and the environment that they create there. George, did you want to comment on Zappos at all?
Yeah, I did. I'm going to back up a little bit, though, and share a comment about, you talked about Price Waterhouse and Google both in terms of the long work hours.
Yeah.
That sometimes leads to a question that I've gotten from prospects and customers, which is, how do we take parts of our culture that might not be all that attractive and be authentic and try to, tell the world that this is what we're looking for? And a great example that I heard specifically around the subject of working long hours was a company that put together a series of employee testimonial videos which had the employees talking about why they were willing to work long hours. Exactly the value proposition that they found compelling enough that they were willing to do that. So I thought that was a great example of how you it's the closest you can kind of come to being authentic while turning sort of a possible negative into a positive. So the comment that I wanted to share about Walmart and Zappos, a couple of things really. One, I talked to some employers who think that the whole concept of employer branding is kind of nebulous, kind of squishy, that it doesn't really have any kind of practical ramifications, that there's no return on that investment. And I would actually beg to differ. I would in fact suggest that there's an incredibly tangible return on that investment. And I love the example of Walmart versus Zappos. Can you imagine how much money Walmart's bad reputation as an employer has cost them over the years?
Oh, yeah.
How much extra money and how much extra effort they have to put in every single time they want to attract good talent. So that's one thought. Another is, one of the things about employment branding in this Google world is you really do have to be authentic. This is not the world of Mad Men anymore, where you can pay an agency to come up with a brand that you think that people might like, and people will actually buy into that. People know the reality no matter how much money a company spends trying to whitewash it. The third thing is, Walmart, its reputation is a hard thing to overcome. So, even if Walmart were to, it's really important to start working on your culture right away because it takes a long time to steer that ship. So, that's, I think, kind of the call out I want to make there.
Yeah, and we had some other people chime in. One person commented, said the quantity and quality of food at Google is outrageous, and their employees can bring their friends to eat without a problem. That's a great perk. Also mentioned that Facebook has vending machines around its campus and have electronics in them, and they're free, so employees and guests can take anything as needed. So there you go. There's some great perks at both Google and Facebook. A couple questions had come in earlier, so we want to open up the time now for questions from the audience. And this one was for you, George, in terms of elaborating more on what the Green DNA Culture Badge was all about.
Yeah, basically it just kind of recognizes, what are the ways that you are trying to practice sustainability and environmental responsibility. In fact, I was talking to an HR person about this recently, and she laughed and she told me the story. She said, that's right. Our most recent hire was a young gentleman who, she said, right in the middle of the interview, he interrupted me and he said, what is your company's carbon footprint? And she laughed and she said, and I didn't even know what the heck that meant, but she said, you better believe I figured it out pretty quickly, and now I know the answer to that question. Interesting.
It's becoming more important, huh?
Yeah.
Another one for you, George, was in terms of Glassdoor. Your opinion on how accurate and reliable Glassdoor is to assess a company culture and organizational strengths to work for.
You know, I think it's getting a little bit better over time, but it's, you know, I think it's kind of fundamentally flawed in that it really traditionally was the board where people with an X to grind went to grind that X. So I think, as compared to Indeed, and when I look at company ratings on both, this tends to almost always play out this way. Glassdoor does tend to be skewed very much towards the negative. Now, the good news and kind of the offsetting factor there is that pretty much everyone recognizes that. But you also see kind of funny kind of overcompensation at the other end of the spectrum, which is you can almost always tell when it's like the company's marketing department created an anonymous account just to sort of try to, you know, put in. So you tend to see kind of a reverse bell curve, kind of extremes of negativity and ridiculous extremes of artificial positivity.
Interesting. And then I'm not sure if you can answer this one, George. An earlier question was looking at the graph between the U.S. workforce, and was there any additional correlation to Canada during the same time frame? I guess could you anticipate it would be similar?
Yeah, I mean, bottom line, I think you probably see a fairly similar pattern for any of the countries that participated in World War II. I mean, in many cases, that's what soldiers do when they come back from a big war, is they start families and they have kids. So you know, that creates an interesting global context because it means there are other countries that were affected by this, but not all countries.
Yeah, okay. Here's a question maybe for both of us. I'll let you take this one first, George, and that is, you know, how do you publish what kind of culture your company has if your company isn't that popular? In other words, you don't have a popular company brand. How do you, you know, get the word out that you have a great culture, for example?
Well, I think it's very important to kind of start just by getting a better understanding of exactly what is your culture and what are your EVPs. One of the things that we see here at the Good Jobs is that inevitably through a facilitated process, and I'll come back to why I think that's so important here in a minute, but through a facilitated process of defining that, almost without exception, employers are kind of amazed at just how much they actually do to be good employers. And I say facilitated process, and this kind of gets back to a suggestion that you made, which is that really the best starting point is actually a kind of a focus group. Really, I think it's important that it's sort of facilitated by somebody who starts with kind of a good sort of checklist of possible EVPs. Because if you just sit there kind of without any sort of assistance as a group and kind of look at a blank page and try to spitball what are the things that we do that make us a good employer, you're not going to end up with a very complete or comprehensive list. So a good facilitated process, we find without exception employers are inevitably walk away like, wow, we're a lot better than we thought we were.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I suggest there too is that you survey your applicants. So even though you're not hiring every single one, maybe there's an opportunity after they fill out an application to take a survey to find out how do they find out about your organization, if they recognize your brand, what kind of attracted them to submit an application. And you'll get some really good information to see how popular you are when maybe you thought you weren't so much. Another question came in that I'll take. It says, when you do the EVP survey, do you make it anonymous and then just ask demographic questions to create the profiles? Do you think anonymity is needed for true answers? And the answer there is yes, definitely. So we do keep the process. We recommend keeping the process confidential. That you answer or you ask those demographic questions on the survey that you create. You know, and they're not required. So you might not get everyone to respond to those demographic questions. Another way to do this that we do is we're able to merge that information with the information from the company's you know, HRIS. And so we can put that data together, still maintaining anonymity, because we're not reporting this. We're only reporting in aggregate. So if there's any breakout that's less than 5 responses, we wouldn't show that information. We're just coming up with profiles in this case as opposed to an individual's direct response. So yeah, anonymity, confidentiality is very important, especially as you're trying to build trust with people in your organization. Here's another question maybe both of us can try to answer here, George. As an individual, what are some of the best tips to get an interview at one of these companies? How do you get them to notice you? So there's from the individual trying to get a job and trying to get noticed. George, any advice for job seekers out there?
You know, 2 thoughts. One, it really varies from company to company. For example, some of you might be aware that Google really changed well, Google does a lot, well, like Zappos, a lot less reliance on job boards and postings and a lot more on kind of relationships, sort of virtual talent communities. So, you know, join those virtual talent communities if companies have those. If they offer a way to actually participate in the community, by all means do that. But the other thing is, almost everything that we talked about today, Charles, as you're well aware, has kind of, from a company branding standpoint or an employment branding, there's the corollary, which is personal branding. So candidates need to really do a good job of understanding, kind of cataloging what they bring to the table, almost kind of what their cultural characteristics are. One book that can really help you wrap your head around this in a very, very tangible, powerful way is StrengthsFinder, for example.
Yeah, I'd recommend the same. Another one here is, how do you identify your culture if you're a government organization? How well, I guess, do the culture badges work in that case, George?
They still work. Really what we're kind of doing, again, is exposing how you invest in your employees and the things that matter to them. So, even government entities have perks and benefits and amenities. Now, sometimes they're a little bit reluctant to sort of publicize that because they're afraid that, citizens might be concerned about how all the different ways that they spend money on their employees.
Yeah.
But, it's just as true of a government entity as any other business. You do have a culture. You do have an EVP. So it's just a matter of wrapping your head around it.
Well, and there's many general, characteristics of government jobs that are really valuable to people. So you look at the opportunity for long-term tenure, longevity, and also benefits that are offered, whether that be a pension or excellent health insurance. Those are usually the main reasons why people are seeking government employment, as well as the stability that you'll find there, and other benefits that you have there might be unique to your particular division. Here's another question: at what size, as far as number of employees, do you feel it's most worth the investment for a company to really devote resources to leveraging your culture and EVP? I'll take a first stab at this, George, and chime in if you'd like. We would say really any size, and so you really need to understand what your EVP is, especially even if you're small, because you're going to be growing soon, and you want to make sure you define what that is so that you're true to it as you grow. We're kind of experiencing that same thing now, whereas years ago, or I should say about 10 years ago when I joined, there's about 5 employees here, and now we're up to about 30, and we're finding it's becoming harder to manage what our culture is and looks like as more and more people join and have less tenure. As you get into even bigger organizations, it's even more difficult to kind of maintain. And so you want to be purposeful in how you develop your culture and define your culture and really keep a close tab on it so it doesn't get away from you. George, anything else you'd add to that in terms of what size would be most appropriate to focus on these things?
I pretty much totally agree with your answer. You used the word purposeful. I was going to use the word intentional, but tomato, tomato. I think, the two thoughts I have are, one, it's not a question of size so much as it is, how is your retention? What are your growth plans, first of all? And second of all, don't wait until you've kind of grown with an accidental culture and you've got problems on your hands before you start thinking about it.
Yeah, excellent point. Well, George, that's all the questions that we've had for today. I want to thank everyone for your participation. Look forward to my email. I'll be sending out a link to the slides and recording from today, as well as the activity codes for HRCI and SHRM credit towards this session. George, anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, just one last kind of closing thought here that I'd like to share. I find that to the extent that some of the employers that I talk to the extent that they think about hiring for culture fit, they tend to think of it in terms of culture fit as a filtering mechanism where we filter out the candidates who aren't a good fit. I would suggest, and this is really, I think, what today's webinar was really pretty much all about, is think about instead how do you leverage your culture to attract the right people in the first place. So I think we had a lot of valuable ideas about that today, and I know that you would welcome, as would I, any follow-up questions from the audience.
Perfect. Well, thanks, George, and thanks everyone for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us on a future webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks,